To start with, you need to arrange a harness on your victim. It can either be a manufactured harness or a hasty harness. We're going to use a hasty improvised harness today, showing a diaper harness application. We've got 2-inch webbing because it meets minimum break strength requirements for what we would correlate at a 15-to-1 ratio. We're going to slide this in under the patient's rear end and work it up to the small of the back. Bring both sides up and then reach between the legs, pulling this segment up. There's 2 thought processes on this. One is to take the doubles and pass them through the singles. The only downside of that application is if this becomes loaded, it can end up functioning as a girth or a cinching component around the torso of the victim. If you take the single and separate it into 2 legs and pull it through both doubles, you end up with a better configuration. It won't be a cinching on the victim. If you want to convert this to a full body harness, you can just slide this up until the top component is higher on the patient's back. Once you're in that position, you're then set to configure this for its attachment. I'll tighten everything up and put a quick overhand in it. We're now ready to do our internal lashing. We're going to use a 12-foot piece of 1-inch webbing and a 20-foot piece of 1-inch webbing. You want to create your attachment point on this modified hasty harness. You're going to take the shorter segment of webbing, find the midpoint, pass a bite through that connection, and girth it. Once that's girthed, you'll take those tails up to the corners of the Stokes basket, above the shoulders of the victim, and you'll put clove hitches on. Ratchet that down, put an overhand safety on. Once the top one's done, you're going to duplicate that same process with the 20-foot piece of webbing going to the bottom corners of the Stokes basket. Pass your bite up to the attachment point and integrate it into the top lashing. Girth it back through. And then finish it with clove hitches at the bottom corners. When tying the clove hitch, always start by coming over the top of the object that you're tying it around. Make a complete loop, and when you come back around, cross over the product, forming an X. Once you have that X formed, when you make your second loop, you're going to pull the tail through the bottom opening opposite that it's coming in. Cinch it all down, ratchet it, tie your overhand. A big part of this internal lashing is not necessarily keeping the victim in if the basket inverts. It's more about keeping the victim positionally where you want them, sliding vertically up or down within the basket. When you look at Stokes baskets, they all have different configurations. Some of them already have the ability to apply internal lashing to some degree. And you want to build up your basket in tiers. So you can see that there's a lower level within the Stokes basket that has pre-manufactured straps already integrated into it. If that rigging segment is below the top rail, then you want to make sure that when you make those connections, you stay at that level of rigging. So we'll go ahead and get all the straps configured. We're now going to configure the external lashing. This particular Stokes basket would not require it because of the integrated manufactured straps. But if you didn't have these straps and only had backboard straps or no straps at all, you need to create a moccasin weave that's going to contain the patient if the Stokes basket inverts. 30 foot of LRH cord or 10 mil or 11 mil rope works well. You can also use webbing products. You start with a girth at the base. pull all the rope through. If you're going to have a significant decline with the foot position of the patient to where they're going to be loading the bottom segment of the Stokes basket, you need to create stop points for the feet if necessary. There are manufactured foot plates, or you can use a weave with the lashing itself. If you're going to do the weave, start by coming above the foot and capturing the side mechanism of the rail. Weave back around, coming under the foot and going over the opposite foot, and then catching the rigging point on the other side. That way you capture the foot, keep it positioned where you want, and resist some of that downward force if you have that declining plane. If the patient appropriately fits within the Stokes basket and you don't need to resist that movement, then you can just go ahead and start rigging. When we rig, we want to duplicate both sides identically. So if I come around underneath here and around the outside on this side, I want to repeat that exact same formation on the opposite side. Once you get to this top corner, depending on the height and the position of the patient, you have a couple options. You can bring both tails of the lashing together at the chest point using a square knot with overhand safeties. One technique that works particularly well if you have head blocks in place and you've applied C-spine protection for the victim is to take the tail straight up to the center point at the top of the basket, thus compressing in the head blocks and just tightening up that overall packaging of the patient. When you get to the top side, go ahead and put a clove hitch in with an overhand safety. We're now going to make our attachment points between the Stokes basket and the lower haul and belay lines. You need to pre-configure your main line and your belay line with midline knots. These are going to be the attachment points to the top of the bridle. The ends of these tails are going to attach to different segments depending on the operation and how we're applying it. With bridles, there's a couple of varieties. There's manufactured bridles and made bridles. The primary component with them is that they be adjustable and easily adjustable, and that they be condensed in overall size. You don't want to have a large gap of material between the victim and the possible max attachment point or the element where you're going to stop the haul because you've hit your directional. Once this is rigged in, we'll go ahead and clip these segments into the Stokes basket. If the Stokes basket you're utilizing does not have engineered anchor points or rigging holes on it, you need to ensure that you're capturing the rail and not any component that's plastic or sheeting or non-engineered or non-structural. Once you're all rigged in, you're going to shorten this system up as much as possible initially. Make sure that everything lays out straight and clean. If you have any twists, then reorient it. And now you're ready to rig your tail. This is where you decide what you're doing operationally. If you're going to tend this basket, then you want to keep the belay tail separate from the victim because it's going to go to the rescuer or the tender. If you're not going to tend the basket, then both the main line and the belay line will go from midline knots to the harness connection point on the victim. The last attachment to be made is the rescuer or tender attachment. Pick-off straps work great. You're going to take the V and attach that to the master attachment point. The U of the pick-off strap would clip into the harness of the tender as well as the belay line. And then you would adjust this for height. To start this operation for the lift, you do a final safety check, make sure that all the hardware components are rigged appropriately and locked. You'd give a short haul so that the victim is loaded and just off the ground, and then you would orient yourself so that the side profile of the Stokes basket is about mid-chest height. That way you're able to effectively tend, keep your feet on a wall surface, and manipulate the victim as needed.